Hi, so today I'm going to be doing the 10 influential books tag. This was created by Susie and I'm going to link her original video down below. I don't think I was tagged by anyone. And the premise of this tag is you list 10 books that have really influenced your life and you just list them without really saying much about them. And I am going to change this a tiny bit as I've seen other people do, and I'm going to be including just a couple sentences about the book. So the first book I have is a book from my childhood, and this is Anne of Green Gables. This is the first book in this series and I really loved this growing up. I read the whole series and it's the book that really sparked my love for reading. Next, in high school, I took a class called Book Talk and we had an array of books that we could choose from, and I chose to read White Oleander, and I am so glad I chose this book. It's such a great look at the mother-daughter relationship. It made me want to read more books that dealt with serious topics. In my last year of high school, I got a lot more interested in history and I picked up a memoir, and this is Inside the Third Reich by Albert Speer, and he was an architect in Nazi Germany. He was the top architect and he worked for Hitler, and this book looks at his life in Nazi Germany, his relationship with Hitler, the inner workings of the Nazi Party, and it's just incredibly fascinating. And I think this is the book that made me want to learn more about history and eventually go into political science. Even though this isn't a political science book, it's a memoir, it still really made me want to learn so much more about the political system in Nazi Germany. He's a very controversial figure, and I will link some links down below. Throughout high school, I didn't really read many classics, and then when I graduated when I was 16, over the summer, I picked up Pride and Prejudice, and I didn't really love it. And then I picked up Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and I just loved it. I absolutely love the writing, and it really inspired me to read more classics. Right after reading this, I ended up reading The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I loved, and ever since then I've been really enjoying reading classics. When I got to CEGEP, I started taking history classes and other classes, and then I decided to read Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela on my own, and I really fell in love with this book. I really enjoyed learning about Mandela's life, and this book did is pique my interest about South Africa and also about resistance movements and about learning about oppression and learning about state-sanctioned oppression, and it really inspired me to learn a lot more, and I'll read many other books about. Still in CEGEP, I took a class in my first semester, and it was a political theory humanities class, and I had no idea if I was going to like this, and we were reading Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes as well as a book by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and this book, I've read this book so many times for different classes, probably at least 4 different classes from college to university. And while I definitely don't agree with a lot of the things that are discussed in this book, the way we looked at it in my first semester of college and the way we continued to look at it throughout my degree really helped me understand how the way you're taught a book and the way you read a book can change your perspective on it. Next, I have another book I read when I was around 17, and this is The Trial by Franz Kafka, and this book is probably the book that has had the most impact on my reading life. So it has inspired me to read a lot of 20th century literature, and I find that the 20th century is the time period that I love most to read about, both with history and also when it comes to literature, and I definitely credit this book with that. So after reading The Trial, I went through a period where I didn't really read much, and I was reading a lot of nonfiction, and it was a really great time for me to be reading nonfiction because I really learned a lot. I kind of felt disillusioned with fiction. I didn't really see the purpose of fiction anymore. I felt like it made no sense to read fiction because nonfiction is so much more informative. But at some point I decided to pick up Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates, and I read it, and it once again really rekindled my love for literature and rekindled my love for reading fiction. Once I was in university, I was reading a lot of fiction, nonfiction, and then for a class in my second year, I decided to write a paper on the Spanish Civil War. And before writing the paper, I decided to check out Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell, and I loved it. I just really enjoyed Orwell's writing. I loved how he described his time in Barcelona during the war. It has really been a very interesting topic for me over the years to learn about. In this book, I really was passionate about learning more about the Spanish Civil War, And finally, I have a book that I actually have not read to completion, and I've read most of the chapters for different classes, but I want to definitely finish it, and this is The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. This is a book I read in my first year of university, and I read it for 2 different classes. The first is my Modern African History class, and a second is a political theory class I took. And for one of the classes we read On Violence, and then for another class we read a chapter called The Trials and Tribulations of National Consciousness. And this book just really made me look at colonialism and made me look at the impacts of colonialism. And what I think it really did, which I'm really happy it did, is challenge my idea of violence and the role of violence in conflicts. And I don't know if it has completely changed my mind, but it has definitely challenged my opinion. And to me, a book that challenges what I think is something that's just really important. Because that was my top 10 influential books. I hope you guys found them interesting, and I will tag 4 people. First, I want to tag Antonia from 28 Bookmarks. I want to tag Colleen from Little Ghost Creations, Dee Dee from Frenchy D, and finally I want to tag Lauren from Glowing Reviews 90. I'm going to link all their channels down below, and go and check them out, and I'll see you guys soon.